Welcome to Sports, Clicks, and Politics with your hosts, Ben Husong and me, Sean Hannon. Which leads us to the, I say main topic of the day, but it's probably the main topic of the year, if not a decade, if not the last.
It's the biggest topic that no one is talking about.
Yeah. And so everybody wants to talk about President Trump being arrested, and obviously first time ever happening in U.S. history. And I'm not saying that that is not a newsworthy and monumentous piece of news. But let me read this headline from the oilprice.com. China settles first LNG, liquid natural gas, trade in yuan. China has just completed its first trade of liquefied natural gas settled in yuan, the Shanghai Petroleum and Natural Gas Exchange said on Tuesday. Mr. Husong, we have been able to maintain our global dominance by the world president, Henry Kissinger, back in 1970-something, I think it was, implemented what is now known as the U.S. petrodollar in an agreement with Saudi Arabia and OPEC, where all other countries, in order to purchase oil, would have to purchase that oil in U.S. dollars, therefore securing, puffing up, creating a reserve currency backed by the ability or the requirement for these countries to purchase dollars. Now, that does a couple things, these countries that are required to now purchase in dollars. First of all, you want to have dollars, so you're either going to buy them or you're going to create some kind of a trade surplus with the United States, therefore benefiting us. Yep. But the one thing that I feel like I've only mentioned, or people have only mentioned a couple times, is so Saudi Arabia ends up having this shit ton of dollars because all these companies and countries and whatever have to use dollars. And what do they do with those US dollars? They buy U.S. assets. So they have been buying U.S. assets, real estate and whatnot, using our dollars and have been using those to basically prop up the United States. Well, I think that all comes to an end, Mr. Husong. This happened on Tuesday, so a week ago. First time. This is on, I'm going to throw a bunch of stuff out there on the table, and then we can just kind of go where we want to go. So this is on the heels of China. We mentioned this the last week or the week before, or whenever it was, that China negotiated a peace in the Middle East deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia, long arch enemies who've been on the opposite sides of pretty much every conflict in the Middle East, are now on the same side, and on that side is China. And so I found that, we've mentioned that, and not only did they negotiate a peace deal between those two countries, both those countries, Saudi Arabia and Iran, have joined what is called the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is a loose-knit NATO, no real military alliance, not really an economic alliance in official capacity, but both of those things in practical terms. So, and, some of the other countries, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, all the stands, apparently.
All the stands.
Not Stan Kalella, though.
Never.
You know who Stan Kalella is?
No.
He's a famous musician locally here. But anyway, not him. Armenia, Cambodia, Egypt, Nepal, Qatar, Sri Lanka, Turkey, all these are either members or observers of this group. So they're all kind of affiliated with each other. Now, I was reading some of this stuff with these countries combined. Let me see if I can find it here again. I should have highlighted this. I was kind of showing. Oh, here it is. So, no, that's not it either. But anyway, I'll find it when we get to it. But this is basically showing they have like 60% of the population covered into this agreement. Some hundreds of billions of dollars of trade are facilitated within this agreement. Like, I think this was the Shanghai Cooperative Organization was founded in 2001. And in 2001, China had trade amongst those countries of something that totaled something like $2 billion. And in 2023, it's something like $250 billion. So clearly they have been able to use that relationship with these countries to facilitate trade agreements and trade in general with all these countries outside of the U.S. dollar.
Yep.
And so here's another headline from Barron's. China, Brazil strike deal to ditch dollar for trade. So now we're in South America, Mr. Husong. Brazil, largest South American economy, has decided to partner with China with a record $150.5 billion in bilateral trade last year. So we have a contagion, if you will. But let's bring us up to the last people who've tried to do this. Do you think anybody else has ever tried to get off the petrodollar?
No.
I present to you Saddam Hussein.
Oh.
We all know what happened to him.
That's not great.
He tried to go around. Go ahead.
When was that?
That was 2000, I think it was. This article from CNN is dated October 30th, 2000. A UN panel on Monday approved Iraq's plan to receive oil export payments in Europe's single currency after Baghdad decided to move the start date back a week. So, Iraq tried to. They had implementation of this, like it was moving forward, and then it wasn't. Iran President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Remember that dude?
I do.
The supreme leader, I think they call him over there in Iran. So they tried to do tried to get around the U.S. dollar. And here's his quote: "There should be a credible and good currency to take over the U.S. dollar's role and to serve oil trades." Weird. Iran didn't do well after that. What about your boy Muammar Gaddafi?
My boy.
Your boy. I mean, just because you guys dress similarly. Very
true.
Very conservatively.
He's basically my style icon.
So Gaddafi in Libya, they tried to implement a gold-backed oil trading system. That didn't go well for him.
I think the exact words were, "We came, we saw, he died."
Bingo.
Hillary Rodham Clinton, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, Secretary of State there. You know, the peacekeeper, Secretary of State. You know, they're trying to keep relations, but they turned into a war hawk machine somehow. So, and let's put a cherry on this. So, Ukraine and Russia. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the U.S., and this is rich, this is an opinion piece in the Washington Post written by Larry Summers. Yeah. The moral and legal case for sending Russia's frozen $300 billion to Ukraine. So Russia had $300 billion of what they call the kids call in these days are sovereign reserves. Not so sovereign, probably not much reserve every year. The U.S. froze $300 billion of Russian sovereign reserves and is now contemplating giving it to Ukraine. This was from March 20th, 2023, so it's being discussed right now about what to do with that money. But I want to start here, I guess. Do you think that all the countries around the world who are holding quote-unquote sovereign reserves took note that they were not so sovereign?
Yes.
And so, do you think it's a coincidence that some of these countries took note and were like, you know what? We should probably get out of dollars.
No.
And so I didn't bring this part up, but I'll let you guys all go home and Google Operation Sandman. About 100 or so countries that have decided to sell U.S. treasuries. I probably should have found an article about that, but I don't know. Let's start there. Well, there's a lot on the plate there for you, Mr. Husong.
It's a lot to unpack, man.
So we have 3 or 4 countries who have tried to go around the U.S. petrodollar in the past, who've all experienced tragic outcomes at the hands of our military. We have countries aligning with themselves that have never been aligned, who've been enemies with themselves up until this most recent time. Maybe if I'll try to find did I send you the president of Kenya? And so he is just giving some speech, basically cracking jokes the whole time too, which was great. Like I thought it was actually it was an entertaining speech.
The people kept laughing.
Yeah. And he's basically talking about, in the next couple of weeks here, we're going to see a huge shift in the economic, entanglements of the world. So we're prepared. We're ready.
He says something to the effect of, "You may want to get out of the dollar," and everybody just laughed. It's like,
yeah. So, I don't know. Start anywhere where your heart's desire, Mr. Husong. We have a lot to digest. This is I'm going to say the beginning of the end. I mean, it has started long before this, but the amount of things that have come into existence over the last even 6-8 months is much quicker than I could possibly. Now, and one more thing, and then I'll let you go. I didn't think, and maybe I'm wrong, I didn't think that it could happen so quickly. Like, I thought even if this was a reality, and I think it is a reality that eventually the U.S. will not be the reserve currency, that it would take maybe a decade to unravel. It seems as though that is pretty optimistic if you're rooting for the U.S. dollar to maintain its global dominance. If I had to, be a betting man, I don't know what actually establishes, what announcement has to be made to change the reserve currency, or if it just will happen and we'll never know, like it just actually just occurred and the countries knew, but it wasn't ever really announced. But I don't think it lasts 10 years. I think this dollar is going down way before 10 years, maybe less than 3 years. So go.
All right. Let's start at the beginning. Just
what the fuck happened in 1971?
A very good place to start. Even before 1971.
Okay, go ahead.
Let's go back to Bretton Woods, where the United States, post-World War II, proposed a plan whereby they would provide security along the seas, keep everybody's shipping routes safe, and they proposed free trade with America. And in return, they made the dollar the reserve currency of the world, and everybody agreed to it because we had the only functioning economy in the world. And everybody else was in shambles because they had just fought an entire world war on their continent. So that happened. Now, U.S. dollar was strong. It was certainly stronger than the Deutschmark or the pound sterling or anything else, which were all supremely in debt. Fast forward a few years, 1971, after the U.S. is the reserve currency of the world, so all trades are being settled in U.S. dollars, President Richard Milhous Nixon makes the... I don't know the right way to describe this. Mundane decision to
in the moment, probably.
In the moment, it didn't seem like a big deal.
It was only supposed to be temporary, by the way.
I know. Where they decided, I think it
just
was
like the tolls on the thruway.
I believe it was a means of fighting inflation or stagflation or one of these things.
Something.
Where they decided they were going to untether the United States dollar from the gold standard. Now, prior to 1971, a dollar was worth $1 because it was worth X amount of weight in gold bullion. After that, the dollar was worth $1 because the U.S. government said so. That's it. Because it was backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. And that was strong enough that we felt good about it. And so we did that. And now I believe right around that same time, they actually made it legal for the United States citizens to own gold again, which, of course, the magnanimous Franklin Delano Roosevelt made it illegal and confiscated all the gold back in 1933.
You sound like a fan. Can you name FDR's top 3 internment camps?
No.
Go ahead, sorry.
Quick rant. Franklin Delano Roosevelt is probably the second worst president we have ever had, maybe the first. I don't know where Woodrow Wilson ranks, but they're neck and neck for
Wilson's
the worst presidents
worst.
we have ever had, bar none. The idea that FDR is idolized or is anything other than ridiculed, dismissed, and summarily despised is such a travesty of the United States public education system that I don't even have the words for it. But that man was terrible. So, anyways, he made it illegal for you to own gold, bought your gold back, generous man that he is, and then promptly tripled the price of gold once the U.S. government owned it all. Yeah, great dude. So anyways, now after Nixon untethers us from the gold standard, we're allowed to own gold again. Thank you, my benevolent overlords, for this wonderful permission. So that happens. Fast forward. Now we make sure that and with the exchange, the deal with Saudi Arabia was we will provide you with security. We'll make sure we fund any defense needs that you have. Namely, Iran was their only defense need because the Iranians and the Saudis are on opposite sides of the split in the Muslim faith, and they are the two biggest powers of their respective sides, and therefore were constantly at war with one another and hated each other. So they decide to go ahead and say, all right, U.S. you settle everything in dollars, and we'll make sure that we got your back. Even when, it's not fighting Iran, but it's carrying out ethnically cleansing bombing campaigns in Yemen, we'll got your back and we'll sell you the weapons. And we'll make sure that you never have to worry. So we did it. Now let's keep going forward. As a result, U.S. monetary policy, I think we can all agree over the last 20 years or so, has looked a little bit funny in that we just print money. Our budget gets released every year, and on average, we take in, probably about $3 trillion in tax revenue, and then budget to spend $4 trillion. Now, I know I have some inside knowledge on this, with my experience as a financial advisor, but let me just help you guys out at home. Normally, when you set a budget, the idea is not to spend 33% more than what you take in. That's normally not how budgets work. So you might ask yourself, how did that work? Well, that worked because in large part, we could just print money. And why didn't we get hyperinflation? Well, because we could basically outsource the inflation to the rest of the world because everybody had to buy oil, and everybody had to buy oil in U.S. dollars. So therefore, the demand for U.S. dollars was constantly on the rise. Anybody that wanted to buy oil had to first go get U.S. dollars and have them to purchase the oil so the trade could settle and then be, I just blanked on the word, changed into their own currency. Whatever the word for change, exchanged. That's the word I was looking for. Sorry about that. So that creates almost a never-ending demand for U.S. dollars, which allows you to just continuously print more and pump more and borrow and spend and take the United States Social Security Fund and invest it entirely in U.S. Treasury bonds, which, again, for those of you who don't know this, a bond is nothing but an IOU. When you buy a bond, you are actually loaning money to the entity that issued the bond in exchange for interest. So basically, the United States Social Security Trust Fund was loaned to the federal government. Brilliant. And it was mandated by law. They had to, and they weren't allowed to invest in anything else. I love our politics. It's amazing. So now you're getting to the point where if you are Tanzania, Uzbekistan, if you're Libya, if you're Kenya, if you're Iraq, if you're Iran, if you're Saudi Arabia, China, Japan, North Korea, Malaysia, pick a country, and you need to buy oil, I don't need to get dollars anymore. I just don't need them. I can buy it in yuan, in a gold-backed brick standard, in dinars, in pesos, in whatever. And the reality is my opinion. I'm open to the idea that I'm incorrect on this, but I can't come up with a good reason why we need a reserve currency any longer with the technology we have today. There just doesn't need to be one, and we certainly don't have any justification for why every trade in oil needs to be settled in U.S. dollars. Other than I'm an American and I want what's best for America and screw everybody else. That's about the best argument I can make for it. So now here we sit where Yemen and Saudi Arabia settled on a ceasefire about, I think, almost 12 months ago now, and it's actually holding. So it looks like that war might be over. Thank God, if you can even call that a war. That was a terrorist campaign that we funded. Then you also have Iran and Saudi Arabia, which, I mean, you think like Christians and Muslims hate each other. The Shiites and the Sunni Muslims hate each other way more than they hate anybody else. All right. So now they don't have the need for our defense. And if they do have a need for our defense, they have Russia, they have China, they have other countries now available to help them in that. So we have essentially made everybody take all this while campaigning on bombing strategies around the world, indiscriminately killing people in these different countries. Whenever a country steps out of line, we sanction them into oblivion because they need our money. They need our currency. So Marco Rubio mistakenly said the quiet part out loud when he said on Fox News, you won't even be able to sanction anybody in 5 years. Like, well, that's probably what they want. They probably don't want the government that we elect in America to be able to dictate when they have to go out of existence, when they can no longer buy food. I know it's crazy for us in America to think that, but if you lived anywhere else, you might agree with the decision or at least understand it. So if these countries now get together, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South America, Saudi Arabia, Iran,
Brazil
is the first one.
Mexico, actually. Yes.
Mexico is the one I was trying to think of there. And on the other half of this, China is now making deals with Malaysia and other Asian countries to settle things in Asian currencies. So if you have all of these decentralized means of exchange, then there's no longer the demand for U.S. dollars. So as we print more dollars, this is like a Ponzi scheme. A Ponzi scheme can go on forever as long as there's new money coming in and a place for it to go. As long as you have that, a Ponzi scheme never ends. But, like what happens with every Ponzi scheme that has ever been run, eventually you run out of people to give you new money. So if we run out of places to send our dollars because they don't need them, they don't want them, they can buy everything they need without our dollars, they don't need our defense anymore, at least not right now, or they've made the decision that our defense is too expensive and that they'll take their chances with their own. That they'll take their chances going to another partner or being responsible for their own or paying off whatever pirates or foreign nations decide to start roaming the seven seas and pilfering their trade. This is very, very bad for the average American. Let me just be very clear about that. Is that if I can put on my most like MAGA pro-U.S., we're the good guys on the world
America
stage.
First.
America first, last, and always, all right? Like, this is bad because now you're talking about a huge devaluation in the dollar. You're talking about economic devastation. I mean, I don't have the proper words to describe to you how bad this will be. And it's going to happen at some point. That's the catch-all. No currency remains the reserve currency of the world forever. It's never going to happen. It never has happened. At some point, this changes. I agree with you. It's happening a lot. We seem to be at a stage where it's escalating quickly.
Yeah, I feel like something flipped recently.
And here's the thing. If Operation Sandman is to believed, and they actually did get, I don't even think they would need 100. If they got 15 nations to suddenly at the same time sell all their U.S. treasuries and anything they held in U.S., it would get the job done. If they have 100, this is laws of economics. If everybody suddenly starts selling, what happens to the value of the underlying object? It goes down. This is supply and demand. So right now we've been able to increase the supply because the demand was forever going up. Now, not only is the demand going to plateau, so in reality, we can't keep putting up more and just printing more money, but demand is going to plummet. And that's going to cause more interest rate increases. It's going to cause fiscal tightening. It's going to cause people not able to access the money that they need here in America. All that aside, and let me just say this again for the record, this will be awful for America. This will be awful for the average American family who does not have enough money saved already, who is reliant upon their job, who is reliant upon this economic system that we have bled, fought, bombed, killed innocent people for, that we just to establish this, that we've used slave labor to continually run. It's going to be awful for the average American. If you're just looking from a humanitarian perspective of right or wrong, I can't tell you definitively it's okay that we keep doing this because it has not come without consequence. The fact that it's happened to people that don't look like you and me doesn't mean it doesn't have consequences. The fact that it happened to people that just had the misfortune of being born in another country doesn't alleviate the suffering of these people that we are causing through our sanctions. And, they've sanctioned Russia now for a year. I got to tell you, Vladimir Putin doesn't look like he's starving to death. We've sanctioned Iran for the last 3 decades. You son of a gun, the people in charge look like they're eating just fine. It's weird how we keep doing this, and the people that pay the biggest prices are the citizens, the individuals. And that's what I have a hard time wrestling with because I think it's an inevitability. That's my ultimate takeaway. I think it's going to happen at some point. I know it's going to be bad, and there's going to be very, very real negative consequences. And just as a reminder, I know we talked about this during COVID, but I don't think we brought it up since. For every 1% increase in unemployment in America, we see a corresponding increase of 40,000 deaths. Stress-related, heart attacks, death of despair, whatever it is. 1% increase in unemployment leads to about, I think the actual number is like 38,000 increased deaths that you can expect. Anytime unemployment goes up by that much, there's that many more people dead. So this is very real. I'm not trying to belittle this, diminish this, or make light of it. It's very real. And it's very real consequences. But the sad truth is we have mismanaged this responsibility as a country. We have let the people in charge, as the citizens who don't make these decisions, we have let the people in charge run roughshod over the world for 3 decades. We have let this happen. We have continually elected these people into office. We have let this become a circle jerk of a duopoly where the people on top are the same 5 families, it feels like, over and over, or the people that do get in are immediately bought. We have handed over all of our autonomy to the bureaucracy, to the nameless and faceless people running the intelligence, the defense, and I don't even know what the other part, like just the federal government in general. Like, who's making these decisions? It's not elected officials. Like, it's the people that are entrenched in career bureaucrats that are making these decisions. So as a result of that, they have taken this, and we talk all the time about power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. They've had absolute power for 50 years. What do you think happened? They ran with it, and they've been running death squads in these countries. They've been toppling dictators, leaders, elected or otherwise. They have been literally filling these places with economic uncertainty or economic devastation whenever it suited their needs. We've run drug wars across Latin America. We've funded both sides of them. We funded both sides of every war ever. We've bombed places with no recourse. We have turned a blind eye to any human rights abuse as long as the people doing it suited our interests. We funded Saddam Hussein fighting Kuwait, and then we stopped. We funded him fighting Iran, and then invaded his country. Like, at some point, we have
Remember when we backed Osama bin Laden?
Of course I do.
Go ahead.
Of course. I mean, we switched sides in the Iraq war and nobody even recognizes it. Like, our Middle Eastern policy, we literally had a shift halfway through to appease the Saudi Arabians.
Remember when we backed Al-Qaeda?
Yes. That wasn't that long ago. That was post 9/11. Like, guys, this is wild. And at some point, and I guess this is my sort of long-winded way of getting around to the point of, I understand. I guess I don't, but I think I understand most of the consequences we'll see, and I know I'm not making light of it. I know how bad it'll be. I'm also not sure I can tell you with a straight face that we need to stand up and fight this and do whatever it takes. That being said, to your point about this is happening rapidly, I don't believe for a minute that the powers that be, these nameless, faceless bureaucrats at the top of these entities and these 3-letter organizations, are going to let this go without a fight. So I anticipate we're going to war with someone, and we're going to war with someone in the not too distant future. And there's going to be some event that triggers it that we all make a thing out of and say, we need to go fight, because that's the only, as of now, they have other tools, but I don't think any of them will work. If they don't work, that's the next step in the process, is we go fight.
And since I misquoted the conspiracy theorists out there, it's Project Sandman, not Operation Sandman. But let me read you. This is, again, from an outfit called Prepare for Change. So,
that's good advice.
Sure. I stand by that sentiment, but prepareforchange.net. I have no idea, who's writing their articles, but this is the general idea of Project Sandman. Said, Project Sandman describes a 100-plus nation agreement that, when triggered, will see those nations simultaneously dump the dollar and abandon the petrodollar status that has allowed the USA to enjoy 50 years of fiat currency counterfeiting and material abundance at the expense of everyone else. When this decision is triggered, the dollar and all dollar-denominated assets will plunge to zero literally overnight. So whether or not that is true or not, I don't know. But the idea that, if to your point, I don't know what the right number is. I'm guessing 100 is well past the right number. If a certain number of companies decide or countries decide to do that, then I think what you just outlined is going to happen. There's going to be a World War III. I mean, there has been economic turmoil preceding wars in the past. It is not a new phenomenon. It is
correct.
Literally the most likely scenario. So, and that is not good for us either. So none of the outcomes seem good here. I mean, I can't imagine the U.S. just tucking tail and being like, you know what, we had a good run. Like, all right, we'll just go back to second fiddle. We'll play at our sandbox over here on this side of the world, and we'll let you guys do your thing over there. That's not going to happen. So
not with the current crop we have in charge.
No, for sure. So again, and I guess we can tie this all together. This seems like it's inevitable, and it seems increasingly inevitable, or at least the outcome, the the end date seemingly is being pushed at us quicker and quicker every single week. I think a large majority of this could happen under the current administration again, which makes me think that it is Trump in 2024. So
here's the thing. If they just didn't fight it, if they just said, okay, we would have a ridiculously bad depression that we could then come out of after about a year or two. Like if we just reset, our country is uniquely well situated to exist without international trade. Most countries are not. We are. We have the capacity.
In your scenario, we default or whatever you want to call it, and then we rebuild. I would imagine we'd rebuild quicker than almost every other country. And we would be back to a world power.
But we wouldn't be the unipower.
Right.
We would be one of the powers of the world stage at that point. We would lose our standing as the number one, unquestioned, one and only ruler, and we would have to be formed sort of we're like the strongest player on a good team when there's another team too, though, and everybody's got to sort of work together or face war. So it wouldn't be that bad if we did it. But the problem is these people will go scorched earth to never concede the power that they have acquired.
Right.
And that is my fear is it would be bad, but it would be recoverable in the event that we actually just let this happen. If they, I say we, like I have some say in this. If they were to
just vote harder.
I'll vote more. Like, vote early, vote often. Let's go back to Tiananmen Square in the 1890s, all right? Like, let's get out there and change it. But the problem is, until somebody shrinks our federal government, until we no longer have these agencies and these bureaucracies running roughshod, unaccountable by unelected people, doing things we don't even know about. Like the idea that people were hiding daily press briefings from President Trump and or President Biden. Everybody's like, oh, thank God there's the adults there. Like, nope, not how it's supposed to work. We elected that guy for better or for worse. He's in charge. You don't get to tell him no.
Did you see unusual? I shared it, a screenshot of it, but I actually didn't look at an article and I should have, so I apologize. But there was Unusual Whales posted something basically saying that OPEC decided to shut off production because the United States said that they weren't going to replenish their reserves. So they're like, all right, well, we don't need the oil. We're just going to shut it down. So like we did it to ourselves too, on top of that.
I mean, listen, they keep doing it because they don't have to take us seriously right
No, right.
now.
Exactly right.
And the problem is if we do decide to go to war, like what are we fighting for? Yeah. That's the question. What are you willing to die for? What are you willing to kill innocent people for? Because that's what war is.
President Xi is supposed to be visiting Ukraine. If he can figure out the end of this, it's over, right? I mean, it's literally over instantaneously. Yeah. If he figures that out,
that'd be hilarious. In a sad way. I say funny in like a tongue-in-cheek way. So. Here's my other stance. I'm not telling you China is good. They're not. Their government is so corrupt. They make ours look like about the same, actually. Ours is still terrible.
We've reached their level.
Yeah, for sure. They're just more public about it, and we are more subject to Chinese propaganda, and the Chinese citizens are more subject to anti-American propaganda, so we're both going to believe the other is worse than they really probably are. But they're both terrible. There's no reason to compare. And so the problem with China is China historically is not a unified country. That's an anomaly in their history. It was only under Chairman Mao with the Red Revolution, and it's only been a few times throughout history. Number two, their monetary policy over the last 20 years makes ours look responsible. Okay? They have printed money irrespective of GDP that would just make your head spin.
Yeah, well, listen, we got mad what it was like 5-6 years ago, and they were like, yeah, we're just going to peg our money to the US dollar. Screw you.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
So. And lastly, the biggest thing that I think China is, because China had their one-child policy for so long, they are not populating fast enough to replace their current people. So they are going to see a fall. They're going to see a decrease, and sometime, my best guess is within the decade. They're not going to maintain this standard as a world power. Now, the bigger problem for China is if you look anywhere in the world, there's usually like a 51-49 split, 51% women, 49% men of any given time in a population. Because China had that, was it two-child policy?
Yeah, I thought it was one, but
one-child policy, whatever it is. And because their culture is so disproportionately favorable towards men, they don't have 51 to 49 women. They got something crazy like 57-43 boys to girls coming up behind. That does not bode well for the future of your people when that's your ratio. So it was a very short-sighted play. Russia's having the same problem. Russia's not going to be a huge military threat because they don't have enough military-aged males coming into that age group over the next 5 to 15 years. We can see I blanked on the word again. I'm having a bad day.
Trajectory?
Yeah, but the population breakdown of who's who.
Demographics?
My God, I'm having a rough day. Sorry. Thanks for bearing with me.
You're welcome.
We can look at the demographics already and see they don't have enough coming, so they can't fight this fight in any sort of traditional sense. Same with China. And so it's maybe we don't need to be constantly at war. Like, maybe we could just say, like, let's not be the sole superpower in the world. Let's have some faith that maybe, just maybe, the Muslims will keep fighting each other and not come to America to carry out if we weren't carrying out bombing campaigns in the Middle East to begin with, which, once again, if you look back at 9/11, the people that did it, 17 out of 19 of whom were Saudi Arabian, wrote a letter, said, we're doing this because you got people in the Middle East and you're bombing our people, and we want you to stop. And then Dick Cheney, in all of his infinite wisdom, was like, you can't publish that. That is clearly them sending secret messages.
That can't be true, Mr. Husung. I was told they hate us for our freedom.
Exactly. Because Dick Cheney said, you can't show this because it's clearly them sending secret messages to their sleeper cells all across America. And somebody went, okay. Even though it was very clear. Now we have that. It's public knowledge. Just nobody knows it. But it was... maybe we've been misled. Like, we all know that Russian citizens are propagandized. We all know the Chinese citizens are propagandized. We all know the people in the Middle East are propagandized. Do you not think we're subject to the same propaganda? Maybe you can speak to this because I read something quickly and haven't followed up. There was a law changed in like 2010 that there used to be a limitation on the CIA that they couldn't run any propaganda operations domestically, and they lifted that restriction right around 2010.
Yeah, they basically, I know what you're referencing, and I obviously don't have that pulled up here, but yeah, so there was some kind of and I don't know if this is related but it seems related to me. I don't know if it was related by the case, but there's been lawsuits where basically against Maddow and Hannity and the likes of those people where they're like, yeah, this is entertainment, not news. So like they don't have to be held account. They don't have to get the facts straight. So I don't know the details on that, but I feel like there's no like written rule that says news and politicians have to be truthful.
No, this was like CIA funding this stuff and being allowed to do the same propaganda campaigns they fund overseas. They're actually allowed to do in America now.
Yeah, I mean,
I'll have to look that up.
Operation Mockingbird.
Don't quote me on that one.
Yeah, Operation Mockingbird has been in full effect. So outside of the propaganda, they've been just disseminating the news, what they want to disseminate anyway.
So just like, look, all I'm asking you to do is be open to the prospect that some of what you know to be true is propaganda driven by the people that are in charge. It's something they want you to fully believe is true, but probably has like a grain of truth to it, but that's it. Like it has a grain of truth and they extrapolate it out and say as if this is everything that you need to see. And I'm slowly opening my eyes to this as time goes on of like, you know what? I'm not telling you China is the good guy. They're not. And please don't ever misunderstand me. But I also can't...
just say it. U.S. is not the good guy either.
I can't say with a straight face that we are. Like, we're not a beacon for democracy and freedom anymore. It's just now we've become the thing we hate. We've become the country that goes around and basically says, well, you're going to do this. And we turn a blind eye whenever it suits us. We topple any regime we feel like when it suits us. I mean, what did Gaddafi do that month that we decided, okay, now? Was he suddenly more evil in that month than he wasn't for the previous 25 years that we just left him alone?
I mean, other than trying to create a gold-backed currency for oil trade.
I'm saying.
Whoops.
It's very unsettling.
We mentioned, Gaddafi and Hussein and the like there of trying to outsource or move around the U.S. petrodollar, and China clearly has done it. It's hard for me to think that the U.S. can just, roll into Beijing and be like, all right, you're out of here. You screwed us with our dollar. So I don't think that's going to happen because I think that would end poorly. Even the people who are in charge now, I think, recognize that. So I don't know what it looks like in 5-10 years from now, but it does not look the same as it does now. This thing seems to be unraveling much quicker than I thought possible. And I guess in all reality, I wouldn't be surprised if next Monday we're talking about a yuan reserve currency. And I'll be thinking that pretty much from week to week from this point forward. So
No, I don't want you on reserve currency. Just make it gold standard. Everybody can get on
listen,
board.
I prefer Bitcoin. I prefer Bitcoin, decentralized reserve currency, but I can't see that ever happening. So it might be it might serve as a legitimate parallel currency to a global geopolitical reserve currency. So that might serve some purpose, but I don't think it'll ever be adopted like universally throughout the countries for its reserve currency.
You can't make Bitcoin the reserve currency because one solar flare and it's all gone.
Well, for sure.
All right. So you got to do something that actually has a physical backing. That's my 2 cents.
All right. Well, Mr. Husong, never go to Tennessee again. No, I'm kidding. All hell breaks loose when you go to Tennessee.
I'm saying.
All right. On that note, anything positive and uplifting you'd like to leave the folks with other than the inevitable World War III and the collapse of the U.S. empire?
Yeah, if it happens, just be good to your neighbors. Don't go to bat for these sociopaths. Just help each other out. We're all going to need it. My God, none of us are equipped for this. None of us are ready for this.
No, that's the factual statement. Get prepared. Be the change. Get prepared.
Be the change you want to see in the world.
Something like that. All right, folks.
I'm starting with the man in the mirror.
On that note. Yeah. On that note.
You want to make an Epstein joke right now, don't you?
No, I don't. We're going to let the folks go for another week. So next week, April 10th, Monday, my birthday. We're going to do a show on my birthday.
We'll make it extra special.
I stopped celebrating my birthday like, I don't know, something like 36 years ago. So, but we will all be here next Monday, back at 12 p.m., our normal airtime there. So for Mr. Husong, or the charming and delightful Mr. Husong, I am just Sean Hannon, and we will see you all again next Monday.